Welcome, everybody.
Do we have a paper?
If you're hungry, please help yourselves to,
I didn't see it.
it's a little more than a snack box and a little less than a dinner box. Enough to tide you over, I hope. Welcome to Reston Community Center on behalf of our Board of Governors, and our Hunter Mill District Supervisor is with us here tonight, Mr. Alcorn, welcome. And John Carter from our Planning Commission. This is the third of 5 community engagement sessions that we're having to discuss a possible art center in this community, heretofore unnamed. And tonight's focus is on the visual arts. So without much further ado, I thank you all for coming, and I'm going to turn you over to our very able consultant team from Grimm and Parker.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for coming tonight. We were just talking earlier about how beautiful it is outside after, 40 degrees warmer than the winter blizzard that we just had this weekend. And flowers are out, so thank you everyone for coming. And we just wanted, as a housekeeping item, this event, just like our last two, is being recorded. And so we have microphones, we're gonna come around, and if you just, we just wanna have a lot of discussion with you. So we're gonna bring a microphone to you to use so that we can make sure that it gets picked up on the recording. And all of the recordings are posted on the fairfaxcounty.gov website. And there's an email link in there too. So if you think of something later on, or something comes to mind, feel free just to jot it down in an email. We love to collect all the feedback in this whole process. So, and we just, again, wanted to just share our partnership here. We have the Reston Community Center, again, is being very generous to host the event and facilitating this dialogue with the community, and we appreciate that. DPWES is here, and that's representing the county's interest in the negotiation of this proffer, and also bringing their technical expertise to this capital improvement project. And as Lila mentioned, my name is Amy Upton. I'm with Grimm & Parker Architects, and here's Julia Pryor. The two of us are a local architecture firm, and it's our delight to work with all of you and to gather your input and put this together to just distill it down to what makes sense for programming and a cost estimate to generate the feasibility of this project. So for tonight, similar to if you've come to past meetings, it's a similar agenda. We just have a little bit of overview to set the stage, make sure everyone's on the same page, and then we're going to have a deeper discussion about visual arts, and we'll do a combination of some polls with your cell phones and or just general discussion with the microphones, and then we can talk about next steps and wrap up. So just a reminder for anybody that's been to previous meetings, and I see a lot of familiar faces, these community outreach projects or meetings are really just to understand the impact of what the community's needs and wants are on this potential project for a proposed arts venue in the Reston Town Center. This proposed art center, as Lila said, the not yet named center would be a result of a proffer from Boston Properties in the next phase, and it would be on Block J, which is highlighted in this little diagram there. And the proffer would provide for an approximately 60,000 gross square foot facility that has a stage that's suitable for large scale music and dance performances, and then other arts related amenities. All of that would fit on that Block J. And we don't know approximately yet how many floors it would be. We anticipate that it would be a multi-story facility, but that's all part of this feasibility. The county and RCC will seek to maximize the ability of this project to meet the goals of One Fairfax and the countywide strategic plan. And if undertaken, this project will result in a facility that serves everyone equitably and with high quality, so being very good stewards of the funds. And the county and RCC want to maximize the usefulness and activation of all capital projects undertaken on behalf of the public. We just want to also remind everyone, this is a standard slide from the previous presentations as well, that RCC will not raise a small District 5 tax rate to accomplish this project, and the county will seek partners for funding for the capital project. And again, we have the RCC contact@fairfaxcounty.gov email address, and just any questions or concerns or additional thoughts outside of these meetings, just continue to use that. That would be great. So tonight we'd love to talk more about the visual arts. And in looking at the arts venues in the region, we noticed that there's fewer amenities for the visual arts. And we know that in the past surveys that have been conducted, because there's been a great number of them, that there's need for professionally equipped or staffed art spaces. We want to have all types of arts offerings, have these facilities near the home community, so a lot of localized in-neighborhood facilities, provide recording studios, film and digital media, be available for affordable rental, that's very important, have adequate technical support, storage, and artist studios and galleries. So some of this overlaps with the performing arts discussion that we had 2 weeks ago, and some of it just applies also to visual arts. And this is really, the site plan is a snapshot from the fairfaxcounty.gov maps community. There's an interactive map gallery, hopefully you all have seen it. It's really a great resource. And at the bottom it generates some stats, and you can just see by these little pie charts that there are more in this general area, more performing arts facilities than visual arts. So this is great that this proposed art center would be a mixture of both. And I know some of you were here when we kicked this off on February 14th on Valentine's Day. All of you showed us your love, and we talked just big picture about some of the facility as a whole. We talked about what would make the project a success to you, what kind of spaces should the new art center include, what types of arts events, activities, or programs would you like to see offered in this new venue. You may say, oh my gosh, these questions that are being asked today are very similar. But today the focus again is visual arts. And when we talked on February 14th and we talked about other important considerations or what can we do to include, to create a diverse, accessible, just and human scale facility, all of that was with the goal of just thinking about the building as a whole. And our goal will be, we're gonna take all the input from that meeting, the input from the visual, or from the performing arts 2 weeks ago, the input from this meeting. We're gonna have another meeting in 2 weeks to talk with arts education providers, and we're gonna be able to see how we can combine all of that. Some spaces may be multi-use or flexible, some may be very bespoke for the activity for which they're designed, and see how it fits on the site, and it all comes together in that way. So, I mentioned a couple times 2 weeks ago we talked about performing arts. These are just a couple snapshots. We did some quick polls before talking more about discussion, and all of this again is on the website. We have the PowerPoints from all the past presentations, and of course the recordings, but you can see that there's a lot of discussion about all the different types of activities, all the different types of performance art spaces and support spaces, and just like for visual arts tonight, we need to talk about the experiences and activities, we need to talk about the actual spaces, and then we need to talk about the support spaces to support those activities. So, without further ado, talking about the visual arts. Okay, every other meeting we've had these little clickers, and unfortunately someone else needed the clickers tonight. So we're hoping that people will feel comfortable with using your cell phone. And if not, don't worry, we'll literally just have you raise hands, and we'll tally it all together, and we'll get it into the record, or into the actual graphics. But if you could use your cell phone, you just type in the search bar. I personally have an Android, so I have like a Google search bar. I don't know how it works with an iPhone. I guess there's a search web browser. If you just type www.ttpoll.com, and you should come up with I probably should have put a screenshot of what it looks like. You'll be prompted to enter a session ID, and for that, it doesn't have to be case sensitive. You can use all lowercase if you want. It's just RACMEET, or RACMEET. If you type that in, is anyone having trouble if you're using your cell phones? I see people typing, so I'm just want to make sure. We probably should have tried our phones too.
Oops.
Okay. It works. So do you actually see this little? Let me see a representation of this.
What was it?
logo.
RAC?
RACMEET. Sorry, it's like rack meat.
Oh.
This is poll 1. And so here, pretty simple. We opened it up that you can choose up to 3 if you want to choose up to 3. But the question is, what types of visual arts events, activities, or programs would you like to see offered at this possible new venue? And of course, keep in mind, you're thinking of this as a perspective of yourself, of a patron of an arts, of an arts experience, like a participant, right? Of a provider, if that's your perspective. And I apologize, we have so many of them. The font's a little smaller this week, but for A, it's 2D visual arts. B is 3D visual art or 3D arts, and it doesn't on your cell phone. You just pick 3 or up to 3. It doesn't like show you. I think that you've hit it. C is arts and crafts, and for that you could think of things like fabric arts or textiles, printmaking. My gosh, so many things. I'm blanking. D is media, digital, film arts. E would be like a makerspace activities. F, street art.
Makerspace.
Yeah, no, it's more of a space, but I guess think of more activities that could go in maker spaces, like maybe 3D printing or cutting or vinyl casting. Workshop. Yep. Workshop. F is street art. G is immersive conceptual. H is rentals. So just thinking about rental space. I, exhibit, and J is other. And we'd want to hear more about other. It's a lot, I know. It's a lot of activities or events or programs. So we have 11 responses now. And since I don't have the clickers, I'm just gonna wait. And I'm gonna, for the people that aren't using their cell phones, when I close the poll and we look at the graph or the chart, we'll solicit your votes as well. We can add those in later. Is anybody trying to vote still?
Or do you
I've got my
submit?
votes in, but there's no way to enter them.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're in. Sorry, there's no like button to submit. It's
Okay.
in there. So
So what do we do with our
you're
answer?
good. You're in. I think you're probably counted.
When did it count? Because I changed mine.
Well, I didn't close the polling, so you can keep changing it, but
Okay.
it doesn't. You can keep going. But if you feel like okay, I'm good for right now.
Okay. So you will close and I
Yep.
will get our answer. Okay.
Okay, well, we'll get your vote. We'll have you raise your hand. Okay, I'm gonna close the polls. Okay.
There you go.
So there we go. And from here, you can see that we have 2D visual arts has the most with 21, but honestly, 3D arts is hot on its tail with 18%. Exhibit space is also very highly scored with 18%. The next highly scored section is immersive and conceptual, which is great. We'd love to hear more about that, about what types of activities and events that you foresee here, because that can of course come with a lot of necessary support, technology, and space. Neck and neck at 9% is media, digital, film arts, and makerspace or workshop, which is great. And then just across the board, we have, luckily everything got a vote except for other, for artists and crafts, street art, and rentals. So for anybody that wasn't able to use their cell phone, or it was very confusing, and I apologize for that, if anybody would like to volunteer what they thought also, that'd be great.
I'm just curious, for rentals, is that like studio space?
So the question for rentals is that studio space, and I think, yes, it could be for studio space. It could be for, you know, even if you want to have a paint and sip class and someone wants to rent a studio space in order to provide an event, or rent a space to set up and have a gallery, or rent a space to maybe have like a reading or a showing of their work, or getting into more like quinceaneras or parties. I mean, it could be rentals on that level too. It is a very generic topic, and it has implications of size and support, so that's a,
So it
it's a
will
good
not be
question.
a space dedicated to the artist, like artist studio, little artist studio.
Little
for
artist
everyone?
studio, yeah, we actually have that on the next one about
Oh, okay.
spaces, but we could have listed that
Because
in
I
here.
would be interested for many of the artists, local artists.
Right.
Because we don't have nothing here.
Okay, so, and I'm just gonna repeat that because I didn't run over to you with the microphone. The comment was that local artists would clamor for a rentable artist studio space to be able to have as their home base for doing their artwork. So that's great, good comment. Does anybody that didn't participate in the online poll want to volunteer or talk about, we have these 2 microphones that we can bring over. Anyone? Or perhaps if someone would want to talk about any of these, like perhaps the immersive conceptual one? It's on.
Is it on?
Yes.
So I just wanted to clarify the makerspace
Mhm.
question. One of the issues that I face teaching sculpture over here is that it's not compatible with ceramics. You can't cast in plaster in an area that's actually housing ceramics because they just don't work together. So just a little bit more room so that we can do cold casting would be a great boost to the sculpture program, but I don't want to be, the only one that uses that
Right.
space, but it would be nice to be able to do that.
Okay, that's a great comment. So thinking about like ceramics is too generic of a term because plaster and cold casting has very different needs
Well, if the
than
plaster
other types
gets
of
in the
ceramics.
pottery, then it blows up. That's the problem.
Gotcha. Anyone else about the types of programs? We can always come back to this because we're going to talk more about the types of spaces in more detail. So, okay, we're going to keep moving. Okay, so this poll, again, cell phones, there's going to be like 5 of these. So this one is, what kinds of primary visual art spaces should this potential new art center include? So again, this is primary visual art spaces. We want you to choose up to 3, so it's not like we're asking for just one. A is a studio specific, and I guess you can use your imagination. We'd love to talk more if you have a specific need in mind, like maybe plaster or wood or welding or sculpture or 2D painting or something. Those could be specific studio spaces. B is studio general, and that may just be more of a multi-use studio space that a lot of different people can use, and there's obviously a lot of storage and different types of movable furniture that would support that. C would be a gallery, either 2D or 3D, we just combined it. D is exhibit walls, anticipating that to be more of a 2D thing, and E would be exhibit cabinets or some sort of display case or display volume space for 3D, and understanding that, those are all very limited focus of what those spaces could be, but it's a starting point for discussion. F would be public art. G, classrooms. And again, that could be a very generic classroom that could also work as a studio or just be a more of a breakout space like this that could also be a classroom. H, immersive or conceptual. I, broadcast video lab, and J would be other. If any of these are too focused and we've totally missed the mark, we'd love you to use other. The polling is open, so if you'd like, you can continue to vote. If you need me to reread any of these out, I'm happy to. Hopefully it shows up on the phone okay. I know we're using all 10 spaces, so it's a lot. Okay. That one went quicker. Okay, so it's closed now, many colors. All right, so rising to the top, gallery. That's great. Really 2D and 3D gallery space has a resounding 26% on this poll. Coming in second place with 11% across the board. And again, we only had nine votes, but we have studio general, classrooms, and immersive conceptual. And then on the next tier down, all even, we have a specific studio, exhibit walls, public art, broadcast video lab and other, and then getting the last or the smallest amount of votes would be exhibit cabinets in 3D. So would anybody like to discuss maybe what the vote of other was? Because we'd love to hear, you know, what a thought would be. Great, thanks. Julia's coming over with the microphone.
Dick Stilson. Many of these kinds of spaces are already included in the Lake Ann RCC and very popular. Is the idea here to simply add to those kinds of spaces or to be something different?
Well, it's a great question, and I think that right now in this sort of visioning exercise, we don't want to limit and say, well, it's already in Lake Ann or it's already here, so we can't provide it in a third venue. I think the thought more is for that neighborhood and that surrounding community in that section of the Reston Town Center, hopefully there's needs and wants for that area, but also for the wider Reston area or wider Fairfax County area. If there's something missing from these two existing facilities, then we could accommodate it in that one. So I think right now, we're not saying that anything's off the table. I mean, there happens to be a woodworking facility here. We're not saying necessarily that, you know, that's off the table completely. If there's a resounding need for something like that, in addition to what's being serviced here in a slightly different way, that's something that we would be able to discuss. So it was a very long answer to say, I don't believe that we're trying to say it can't already exist in one of the two existing facilities.
Hi, Guy Zoller again. One of the issues that we have right now is the Joanne Gallery, Joanne Rose Gallery, which we absolutely love, is not compatible for 3D exhibit because they have other events in there. You know, RCC has very kindly created 3D cabinets for us to display our work in, but if we have a dedicated gallery, we don't need the cabinets. So you could display both 3D and 2D in a dedicated gallery as opposed to having separate cabinets for sculpture.
Gotcha. And that's primarily because at the Joanne Rose Gallery, it's
Well,
also open for events
Yeah,
and
that's
studio
right, yeah,
salons and
Totally
rentals
understandable,
and,
yeah.
right.
I mean, we have the best solution possible
Gotcha.
under the conditions, but it'd be nice to have a gallery.
Understood. And is it the size of the cabinets that are currently at Lake Ann, is that limiting to certain work, or
No,
has it been
it's-
accommodating?
Because sculpture is generally meant to be viewed in the round, you can only see it from one side, it's a cabinet.
That's a good point. So, sorry, for the recording, the comment was sculpture generally meant to be viewed in the round, and with those cabinets currently, you can only really see it from a smaller vantage point. So. Yes.
Yes, I thought that an art center that we're building is something that is only an art center, so where you can have a studio for artists, a dedicated gallery that will be only gallery and will not be rented as we join gallery. So we can use it for real, and especially in this moment here in Reston, what is missed, the art studio for artists that can work and exhibit in contemporary, and a real gallery that is open to everyone. Because we have Grace Art, that is like a private gallery, and we have the community center. That's what we have. I'm talking because I'm from the League of Reston Artists. We are the oldest league, and we don't have a space. And I think that is something to consider. Preparing an art space is a big thing, so it's important to take the vision of us as artists, of
Right.
what we really need in this moment.
Thank you. Anyone else that may have voted for other that might, maybe that was about this dedicated art studio space, but anyone else?
A gallery too.
The gallery too. Anybody that didn't get to vote on the cell phone and now would like to sort of just raise your hand and shout out your three, that'd be great. Okay, that's fine. No pressure. Oh, no, okay, sorry. I'm I'm very excited. Okay, poll question 3. We're still on our phones. This one, what kind of rental activities or spaces do you need? And again, this is talking about the rental spaces, and this is a little mixed up because we have spaces and activities in one vote, so forgive that. But A, we have social events, B, business meetings, C, studio rental, D, co-working space, E, community meetings, F, concessions, G, catering kitchen. And for those, just to anticipate any questions, we heard a lot about, in the very first meeting, a discussion about like a kitchen and teaching culinary arts and or catering versus 2 weeks ago when we had performing arts and we talked more about just the need for concessions for the facility itself or for events that maybe would need to rent a concession space. So they could be slightly different. And okay, and then H is lobby and I is other. So feel free to vote up to 3.
I don't understand D. Can you explain that one?
D, co-working space. So looking at some other community art centers, but they're probably working more as a community center, is that they might provide smaller breakout spaces that could be rented by an individual for the day or for a longer period of time to actually work out of their house, but not necessarily rent an office, or to work in like a small sort of startup capacity and have a couple desks and use the the computer equipment, or maybe have borrow it for meetings and have it's slightly different than a business meeting. Maybe you're meeting with your coworkers and you have a very small company and you're using that space as like a rentable space for working.
Kind of like this space?
Yeah, I mean, it could be, but maybe again, I guess it would depend on if there was a need for that in this community. We could drill down into, are there tabletops, like a WeWork sort of thing, like are there tabletops with computers already provided, or you bring in your own and that sort of thing.
Excuse me,
Yes.
but is a community center or is an art center?
Well, it's a Reston
think?
Arts Center, but we're
That is
trying
a
to
community
understand.
Art center. So an art center is done for art, performing art, visual art. You cannot put those under the space for cooking or for office. We have this other 2 community centers here. So why you want to do a third community center and call it this like art center? An art center is an art center.
So the comment for the recording is that there's already 2 community centers,
Yes.
and if this is a dedicated art center for performing arts or
And
visual
visual
arts and
art.
3D arts, don't focus on community space in it or
Yes.
and or community needs. It's more of a
Yes.
vision of the artist as the main proprietor or user of the space. So. Okay, so we have 10 responses. Anybody else want to vote? Okay, we just 11. Okay, great. So rental spaces and activities, we have social events is the highest for across the board at 70%. We have studio rental and co-working space, catering kitchen. Lower than that, we have community meetings, lobby, and then the business meetings, and 0 for concessions and other. So I guess the question that I would have, because I don't believe that I'm asking this specifically in the follow-up, for social events, rental activities for social events, I mean, I can imagine what an art-focused social event might be, but would anybody like to volunteer what they have in mind or what they could envision using this potential art center as a social event rental space with an arts focus?
Social event can be a silent action.
Hold on 1 second. Here's
For
a
example, can be an artist's opening, can be a silent action done by artists, can be so many things. So
Great. Anybody
anyone
else?
else has any
Oh, we
idea?
lost our video. Okay, sorry about that. Okay. Anyone else want to talk about studio rental about size? I mean, I can envision it could be as small as an individual artist, it could be a whole class getting rented, a studio could get rented for a class. Is there any thoughts on potential size needed or how many studios to be rented?
Can be also an open space.
So hold on, sorry. Mark's
Sorry.
That's okay, it's great.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's
fine.
Can be also an open space for
Partition.
artists. You know, that's everyone has their own space, but it's nice to have artists that can communicate it, can exchange vision, can work together, because that is the meaning of the art.
Mhm.
So if we lost this,
Great, thank you. Okay, oh yes, thank you.
Can I ask a question that's sort of slightly confusing me?
Mhm.
How are you going to get earned income into this arts centre? Is there going to be a bottomless pit from somebody, or have we got to earn money to keep this place alive?
Right.
And that is an enormous, I think, this really should have been, we should have talked about this at the beginning, because then we would probably all come up with different answers.
Right,
And I understand this lady at the back here for sure, but running an arts centre, I've got to keep it alive. So some things, I sell my soul to the devil and say, oh, no, a social activity is a baby shower because they pay me a lot of money or whatever
Right.
to be able to do that social event.
Mhm.
So is this, how are we going to fund this arts centre?
Right.
That's just my question.
cooperation
Corporations.
between
Corporations are suffering the same as everybody else.
You know, I
But,
don't know, we do
you know,
a lot of things
This is
as
America, they have a lot of
cooperation.
No, it's a great comment, and I mean, we don't have that answer personally, but it's on record, and we appreciate it coming up every time. So you're right, having that understanding could focus your responses, right? And right now, we're sort of just saying, trying to mentally divorce yourself of that understanding. What types of spaces do you feel are lacking or could be better, and types of activities are missing, so. Okay, we're gonna keep going, but we can always come back to these. Okay, so now we're gonna talk about support spaces, and for support spaces for visual arts, clearly there could be a lot of other things here, but what we've listed, and if you could vote again with your cell phone, I know this may get tedious, but we really appreciate it because it does seem like we get some feedback that way. Support spaces for the potential new art center with a visual arts focus today would be A, administrative offices, B, reception, C, the storage or shop for the facility, D would be storage for artworks, temporary. As you know, we've talked about this proffer being a sort of a limited size of a 60,000 square foot facility, and so ongoing storage for a lot of different arts groups is probably not very feasible. E would be security, F, lobby, G, loading, H, a control room, and I, other.
Can you
And-
clarify control room?
Oh, yes, that is a holdover from the performing arts. You can ignore control room. Sorry about that. That is a good point. Unless there's another definition of a control, I think that is definitely, well, I guess maybe because we've lumped in visual arts, film, cinema, film, recording, sorry, more of like a tech lab control room space for things that wouldn't necessarily only be in a silo of performing arts, but yes, for visual, digital, media, film, arts, some sort of control room. Sorry about that. Okay, we have 13 responses here, so. Anybody still voting? We'll just wait another minute. You can vote up to 3. And I feel like it's sort of a obvious thing that there'd be a lobby for the facility, but I guess what we're trying to see is if there was an overwhelming vote of like, this portion of the facility maybe also needs its own lobby, then that would be an impact to the design of the facility versus a shared lobby for the whole facility that could serve the whole facility. Otherwise, it should seem that a lobby could be understood. Okay, so I stopped the voting, and you can see in the green tower there, again, it's hard to turn my head here, but storage and shop for the facility, that is the overwhelming vote, and we appreciate that everyone recognizes that because there's never enough storage, especially if you are having dedicated and shared uses. Obviously with shared use spaces, storage is critical as well. The 17 or the pinkish color of bar is administrative offices, and that's good to hear. And then we have storage for artworks and loading, and then for 11% we have reception and security, 6% control room and lobby, and then no votes for other. And did anybody either not get to vote or wants to discuss any of these? Like, for example, is anybody here thinking that they might want to weigh in on what types of offices or how many offices you foresee? Is it offices for artists or offices for like the League of Reston Artists, or an office that is a general use that people that has a printer or something? I don't know. Just a few offices might be enough. Same thing with storage. Any further clarification on types of storage, or is there something that comes to mind that might be unique as to the type of, like a special type of storage or a connection with lobby or loading? Okay. We'll just keep moving. This is great though, thank you. Okay, so now you can put your phones down. We'll have one more poll a little later, but here we wanted to talk just a little bit more about, we lump together classrooms and studios, but we were talking about, and we mentioned here, consider teaching environments. You could also imagine instead just creative environments and not necessarily always teaching environments. It could just be a creative environment with low or no barriers to participation. What's the focus or activity going on in each classroom or studio? And I guess for us, what is useful to be able to figure out an idea of feasibility for size of these components and also put an idea of a cost estimate together would be to know how many we would be having. And perhaps if you think with the focus of what you know from these existing facilities or from other surrounding facilities that are nearby, are there a few larger classrooms? Are there smaller studio spaces? How many? I mean, we can come up with that, but we want to hear from anyone here of if you have some idea of, if you know in your mind, like, yes, it's this size, or it's a couple spaces. They need to have flexible walls. They need to have a certain amount of storage. They need kilns, or they need, I'm just picking on woodworking because it's down the hall. Display and teaching walls, other. So this is where we'd like to hear from you a little bit more detail about the types of studio and or classroom spaces that you would like to see, thinking about the programs or activities and experiences that you've heard of or you know that you'd like to have in this facility. And Julia has both microphones, so if anybody would like to volunteer some feedback, we can bring you the microphone. Great, thank you.
I hate to be a nudge.
No, we want to hear feedback even if we're missing the mark here.
A couple of comments. My personal viewpoint is the individual studios are a critical need in our community. We don't generally have places to work unless we build a thing out behind our house or work in our basements. And they don't need to be large and they don't need to be fancy. Bathroom access, a blank room with a couple of cabinets where we can lock up our tools, and that's it. And it doesn't have to be huge, 10, 12 feet square for many of the things. Not everything, but like for if you had a pottery,
yeah,
that would be plenty of space to put a pottery wheel in. and so on. We have the kilns in the common area. So that's my personal focus. That's not necessarily everybody's need, but that's what I would like to see. And then as far as walls are concerned, the more walls, the better. Windows and walls, because 2D art goes on walls.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Also, I mean, I guess I was thinking about the arts and crafts, there's also glass works, and I mentioned metal, printmaking, textile, fiber arts, they may be the same. Painting on wood. Any other comments about maybe even classroom spaces? That as I mentioned, in 2 weeks we're talking more with the arts education integration of this facility, and so perhaps this might come up more in that discussion, and we'll get some more feedback from there. Yes, thank you. Wait, Julia's just got a microphone, just so we can get on.
Has anyone brought up dark rooms or?
No?
Oh, okay.
Great. So is that something that you see as a need?
I think
Yeah?
so, yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Anyone else? It's okay, it's great. We can, and again, we can always come back. Okay, gallery, exhibit space, and maybe we've already talked a little bit about this. This is not a voting, even though it looks like a voting, sorry, we're just talking, but I think we've heard a little bit from you tonight already about the need for dedicated gallery and not just a multi-use space that also has gallery walls or cases, the need to be able to display and experience 3D art in the round. It could be an open space, or it could be also the dedicated space. And any other idea about size of a space, or any other, do you think it's a problem if it shares with a lobby or circulation space, as long as perhaps it could be closed off at times, or is that a deal breaker? Same thing with rentals. I think we heard that only having one space and having it double duty as a rental space could be a down or a negative.
Yeah, I'd say that's a deal breaker.
Okay, okay, good. This is what
We
we want
want
to
a
hear.
dedicated gallery, no, not just a circulation space that turns into a gallery.
Great.
No party, no quinceanero, no cooking class, gallery.
Gotcha. Great.
Hi, I'm Erin.
Yes.
I've done a lot of photo shoots at Mason with their artwork displays, and they have this one room with all the windows, and they can do collaborative pieces because it's such a large room. I think it's just stunning. So I don't know, just something to consider, maybe at least one room with large ceilings, lots of windows to give that natural light, and it's just gorgeous. So you can see all the pieces that work together.
And sorry to bother you, thank you, but for collaborative pieces, what kind of,
So like,
Sorry.
Sorry. One of the more recent ones that I photographed where some of the students came together and they all created their pieces separately, and they came together in the room and then put them together as like a group. And it was just really interesting to see the different styles of art, but then together as one piece.
that's great. Thank you. I think here also, if we, you can think about different types of gallery space or art, like light installations like Terrell, or any other types of immersive types of space that, is it a classroom, or is it a gallery, or is it just an exhibit space that they walk into and experience? Is there anybody here that maybe wants to talk about their wish list for that sort of space? Because I feel like in one of our previous initial polls, there was a lot of people that were excited or potentially just voted for an immersive conceptual type of event space. So any ideas of the types of artwork that this community is missing on type of either creating or exhibiting? all of the above. You enjoy Kasuma. Okay. Talking about the gallery some more, we definitely heard from you about it wanting to have a dedicated gallery that's not shared for social activities. But what about, are there any support spaces or special equipment? I mean, I imagine if it's a tall space, perhaps some structure for hanging things, or is there special lighting or flexible walls or lighting? Okay, we got.
Sorry. Because there will be visual art and performing art, so this space will be a theater dedicated to performing art, and another space as gallery and visual art, or will be everything together like a big
Well, it's a good-
minestrone, you know?
Yeah, no, that's a good comment.
Because,
We have heard from our previous engagement sessions about having a dedicated proscenium type of theater for performance spaces like chorale and orchestra and plays and comedy and performances like that, larger perhaps than center stage here, but that there could also be a dedicated rehearsal space or smaller space that would also have technical capabilities with lighting and sound and flexibility in there that probably could also be used for performance art. So it's possible
Yeah,
that some of
when you,
those
when you
spaces
talk
would be-
about conceptual performance art, I mean,
Yeah.
that's what it generally is, performance. And I know from the first meeting that I attended with you guys, the music and performance arts got a big focus. So I want to make sure that this one's dedicated to visual arts and what we need. In terms of equipment, the lighting for a performance space is way different than what you would need for a gallery space.
Exactly.
And yes, we would want to have some kind of hanging system integrated into the gallery so that we wouldn't have to be, you know, improvising with nails or fishing line, that sort of thing.
Yep, that's perfect, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, that's
And
great.
the open studio, the open space where I was talking before was dedicated for like studio for artists, not for gallery. The gallery
Yep.
should be apart.
Yep. Thank you. You in the red shirt and did you, yep, was everything you were gonna
I'm just
say?
agreeing with her.
That's fine, I mean, but we got a little time if you wanted
Well,
to
we oughta,
expand.
if we're gonna do galleries, let's do it right and put in the proper lighting. You know, track lighting with, you know, the ability to wash the back walls, put in flats that you can hang additional 2D art on, pedestals for sculpture, you know, those sorts of things. And believe me, I'm very happy with what we've done so far.
Mhm.
Don't get me wrong.
Yep.
I am very grateful for everything we have. But,
Maybe,
you know, if we're talking wish lists.
Yeah.
you know,
We are right now, we're talking wish lists, so it's
Yeah.
good, thank you very much.
as long as we're talking wish list, then, you know, somewhat reconfigurable space, floor space, where the walls could be reconfigured so that the gallery isn't always the same, depending
Mhm.
on what is exhibited. Whether it's sculpture and it's more open, or it's
Yeah.
just wall art, that sort of thing.
Yep, that's great. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, this has been good. We're still moving here. Okay, talking a little bit more about digital media, recording, broadcasting, film, cinema, the art of making, all of those things. I know it can have a leg in performance art and it can have a leg in visual art, but I feel like we didn't get too into it in the previous sessions, so we thought this would be a great time to talk about it some more if anybody here wanted to contribute some thoughts on it. But we're thinking about the spaces needed to create the work, digitize performances, maybe performances that are taking place in the facility, film screenings in a variety of spaces within the facility, and then broadcast beyond. I know that's a lot of things, but obviously one great plus that's come out of the pandemic is that people are more comfortable perhaps with watching live stream or watch recordings, and it can be more accessible and equitable for everybody to be able to access the performances. And so here we were talking, would love to hear anything that you want to share about the quantity of spaces or size, open or enclosed. I mean, I guess we're thinking, obviously you'd want it enclosed and be able to shut a door, but is there a flexibility of it could be a larger space and then it could compartmentalize down to a smaller space? Any concerns about what it touches, that it needs to be on a circulation space or it needs to be adjacent to another space? Rental considerations for this. We could imagine people would want to rent this space, and that was that sort of misnomer of a control room, but thinking about renting these spaces. And then support space, equipment, and storage needed. And of course, we would have all the requisite utilities, but if you have in mind, you have a focus, you want to make sure we get it on record of a specific need for something with AV, IT, or MEP needs, we'd love to hear it.
I worked in broadcast for most of my life. It requires not only specific spaces for a control room, a studio where you shoot, that can be, for a storage for props, that sort of thing, which, you're right, leads into the performance arts. But the equipment is very expensive, and I don't know if you're, what exactly you're considering here in terms of broadcasting facilities, but it would be very expensive.
Understood.
Yeah.
And there was a discussion at like our very first meeting about the idea of creating a space that high school students or elementary or middle school students could come to and learn a little bit about maybe supplement spaces that they don't have in their school, and they could use these spaces to dabble around in creating film or cinema or doing some broadcast or podcasting. So maybe it's not as professional of a broadcast studio, but if that was something that the community was very outspoken about, then it would be something that we would want to look into and analyze to see if it was feasible. But thank you. Any other thoughts on this or representatives that could talk about it? In the back.
Sure. I'm happy to chime in.
Thank you.
Sure, I'm happy to chime in. I think it would be incredible to have a space where students of different ages could come to learn filmmaking. The sad fact is that in our high school, we do not have filmmaking classes. Students in this area have to bus to another high school to get filmmaking experience. So I'd love to see a space like that for our students. I think in terms of equipment, you'd have to think about both production and post-production. So you'd have to have both the filming equipment plus the editing equipment available.
Which gets
Great.
expensive.
Thank you.
Yeah.
One other idea, as long as we're doing wish lists, a small dedicated space for artists to photograph their work with the proper lighting and backdrop. All you need is a table, a backdrop, and a couple of tripod lights. And that would be probably one of the biggest benefits that we can provide artists here. Is that okay?
Thank you for speaking up. I think the comment was, just to pick it up on the recording, let's all speak louder into the microphones. Okay, any other comments on this? We have just a couple more to, oh, great, thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to add on to what we were just talking about filmmaking, and I want to stress that, it's not, when we think about filmmaking, it's like making movies, right? But video, TikTok, right?
Yeah.
This is like the #1 means of communication for everybody right now, and it's only going to get bigger. So supporting that as an opportunity for young people to get that experience, because we're seeing in higher ed that everybody is required to make some sort of video, not necessarily movie making, but communicate via video. So creating spaces that facilitate that, even on it's almost like a lower level, right, from filmmaking. And so maybe you can find a way to maybe save on some of those upfront equipment kind of costs, but still create a space that sets younger folks up for that need.
That's great comment, thank you.
Leading on from that, and I totally agree with it, because I think I said this 2 weeks ago, the technology is, we're not trying to think about what we need for the here and now. We've got to be thinking 20 years on, and it's only going to get more. But there is, I mean, we have got one school, we've got the Academy in Fairfax. They have all of this there. Is there a way possibly then of asking Fairfax County Public Schools to be a part of this, and then instead of, they can take it on, they can have the space, but they can take it on, so it then keeps, you know, students from the Fairfax areas, but from this area, which is growing like topsy. I mean, you know, but they'd be a great partner in this. But I do really, truly feel that technology needs to be, you know, increased. And George Mason, indeed, I mean, they have got a wonderful setup, so they could be another good partner for us.
I'll just.
Thank you.
One more note. So I do teach film at George Mason, and I can speak to you about how they've gone about setting up their equipment, their both production and post-production for educational purposes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So great comments. Okay, we can always come back to this. I'm just gonna keep plowing ahead here. Oh, another poll. Okay, we're gonna have 2 more polls, so pull out your phones again if you have it. It's, let me go back a slide, sorry. It's www.ttpoll.com. Just type it all in. And then if it's timed out, or if your browser closed and you need to enter the session ID again, it's RACMEET, RACMEET. It's not case sensitive, you can type it all caps or all lowercase. And hopefully when you log in, you'll see this slide somehow on your phone.
Which one are we on? Gallery?
No, we're on public art. Does that show up on yours now?
No, connection lost.
Oh, connection lost. Can you refresh?
Yeah, refresh.
Can you hit refresh or like
That's what did it to me.
minimize it? Sorry, I apologize, we don't have those clickers today. We'll make sure, well, we're doing Zoom at our next meeting, so that'll be just a different type of polling, but. Have you been able to start it up again? Have you been able to start it up again? Okay, well, anyway, we'll start voting here. It's very simple, and we restricted it to 1 answer this time instead of up to 3. So, public art. Thinking about public art, we assume that it'll be designed concurrent with the project and incorporated into the planning. So thoughts about, obviously we'd want to be successful with public art, so being able to work with you know, an artist or an RFP for artists in a conceptual way to make sure that we have the accommodations for structure or lighting or cover control, thermal comfort if it's needed, and visibility would all be taken into account. But believing that all of that is taken into account, do you prefer public art? Inside, outside, both, or other? It's a pretty simple question, and I guess
We want it all.
we want it all. So both, inside, outside, and both. That's good. This is my best poll. I love this one. Okay, so we want it everywhere, inside, outside, everywhere. I love that. Well, let me go to the next poll. There's one more poll. So let's go to that one, and we can talk more about public art. Okay, what else should we consider? And again, maybe I should have had E, all of the above, and I didn't. So maybe consider D as other, as being all of the above. But for this, what else should we consider? That it be iconic, that it be an experience separate from the facility itself, or a feature integrated into the design of the facility, or other. And I mean, I know that there's so many.
What is A?
A, iconic, would be, I guess the thought for that was, like, if you're driving past, it's like, wow, I'm almost crashed my car, look at that, that's amazing public art. Or I'm walking by and I trip because I'm seeing something and it's so iconic, I think, oh, it's like, you know, it's
like the bean.
like the bean, right? Like the bean in Millennium Park in Chicago. That has become, you know, so well known and iconic that that's a meeting place for people. And so anyway, maybe
100%.
that's 100%. It should be iconic.
Yeah,
Okay, so we have 11 responses.
100% A.
We have some shout outs of 100%. It should be iconic.
Don't influence
And I guess B and C are sort of part of that. I mean, it could be iconic and an experience separate from the facility or integrated into the design of the facility. Okay, so we sort of hovered with 12 responses. That's pretty good for this group. So I'm gonna close polling. Great, so a lot of people, iconic, integrated into the design of the facility, and then some other. So is other all of the above? I see some nodding heads. Is there any other? Yes.
I recall from one of the earlier meetings that there may be some outdoor space that's attached to or available to the Performing Arts Center.
It's
and
possible.
Perhaps that would be considered for public art if it's highly visible from the road.
Mm-hmm.
If you want it to be iconic, you can't hide it inside the building.
Mm-hmm. Good point.
That's true.
Thank you. Any other thoughts about public art? Any ideas right now of vision? We all agree it's a good thing. We can all agree on that. And it definitely deserves an iconic place or to be an icon within this facility, and it would all be planned in, so that's great. Okay, now we have some sort of general catch-all questions. We're moving at a pretty quick clip today, but this question we have had at previous meetings, but it's always good to revisit it because with the focus of the visual arts and the focus of everybody even that couldn't be here with us in this room today, but perhaps you know you have someone in mind or an arts group or a type of performance or event. What can we do to include or create a diverse, accessible, equitable, and human scale facility? Maybe you haven't had a chance to speak to this in previous meetings, or right now with visual arts focus you have an idea, but would anybody like to volunteer some ideas on this? Great.
I think one of the keys is the transportation. We have some communities that won't have that access unless we have a bus or some other way for them to get here.
Mm-hmm.
Also, a sliding scale, you know, for different programs or different classes that are provided. And I guess that would be scholarships also. And I'm just wondering about bringing, well, you have the center, so, but bringing certain programs or maybe speakers to, we have a community center in Southgate, and, you know, introducing, you know, young children and families to artists and what they do, those kind of things.
That's great.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you need to cast a wide net here and get more communities involved. I don't see that much diversity in the room today. And, you know, a wider advertisement and maybe minority media, I don't know.
Yeah.
Event.
Yeah, maybe a special event.
Special events. If the artists are in the artists are involved with the gallery and with the studio, they can absolutely create the event, engage with the community, providing a tour, providing a workshop, part-time workshop, you know, just something fun, event.
Yeah,
That's it.
that's great. Thank you. Anyone else? Great. Julia's coming with the microphone.
So this seems to be going in a space that is a little bit forbidding physically because there are really tall buildings there. So to think about, in terms of human scale and it being inviting, with the architecture as it's planned, and perhaps public art takes a role in that as well. And I love the idea of something that's sort of a satellite to, like the Arc in DC, that invites people, that's, putting its fingers out into the community more as a space, that it is thought of in that way.
Yeah, that's a great comment, thank you. Thank you. Any other thoughts? Anyone over here? Sorry, Julia. I was gonna handle this side of the room.
I mean, we know it's in Reston, but it might be useful to broaden it out a little bit, what it serves. I mean, there was a map, I think, at the first meeting, and it showed the Silver Line, at least going from, I believe, Falls Church out to the hinterlands of Loudoun County. And so Reston is really the center of that map. So we could think about it, not just serving Reston needs, but that whole area, broaden out our, the types of folks that we're reaching out to. North and south, you've got Drainsville, and then we've got Franklin Farm, and farther north and south. So I think this facility, it is in Reston, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a Reston facility, broadening it out a little bit. And then another thought that I have sitting here is, and this is a whole different topic, but I was looking for a right place to put it, the 60,000 square feet and the site area, that was part of the proffers. Doesn't mean the facility has to be 60,000. It can be smaller, it could be quite a bit smaller.
Correct.
Than 60,000, so we shouldn't necessarily think of it being 60,000, and that might address some of those cost concerns that people have brought up. The site, I think the site is large enough, but of course we have to test that. But next to the site is open space, and you can see it on your original map.
Yeah.
So it could spill out into the open space. So I just want to bring those spatial aspects of it. If you think about performing arts, we talked about 500 seats maybe, or 600 seats. It used to be 10 square feet per person was the way that you would judge the size. Well, if you have 500 seats, that's only 5,000 square feet. Even if you double that, you're still only at 10,000. And even if you double that again, you're still only at 20,000. It's a long way to the 60,000 mark. So I just wanted to say that.
That's good, and it's a good segue to what else do you feel are important considerations for the county to respond to this opportunity? Thank you for volunteering that. Great.
Hi, thanks. Just step this way. I'm Robert Dowdy. I'm probably going to approach this in two ways. One with my hat as board chair of Tefra Institute of Contemporary Art, and our executive director Janelle Hazard, and our associate curator Hannah Parker are here today as well from Tefra, and also as the executive director of Reston Town Center Association. So I think this is going to piggyback on John's comments. To me, there's a fundamental strategic visioning question here. And maybe this isn't the right forum for this, so I'll stand down whenever you kick me under the table. But Reston is increasingly the center of the county on some level. And so this is prime real estate. And how are we envisioning use of this space? So on a 60,000 square foot facility, I would have assumed a very significant portion of that would be for the Performing Arts Center, which we're going to do. 500 seat plus or minus. I would have thought that was like 2/3 of the facility. So the question is what's left? And how are we as a community, how do we want to prioritize that space? At Reston Town Center, we think of ourselves as a regional destination. This is right on the Silver Line. At Tefra ICA, we think of ourselves as a Reston-based but regional cultural center. And the question becomes, do we as a community want to privilege space, this kind of prime real estate, to a 501c3 and help stand up a 501c3 in that space to make this more of a compelling regional destination? I think that's a longer question and longer discussion. I don't want to dominate the conversation, but I do want to throw that topic out there. I think there's some other conversation that needs to be had amongst community leaders and others about how we want to privilege and use this space and envision this space beyond a performing arts center. And if we think about what RCC does this beautiful blend. It serves the local community in these powerful ways. The Reston Players is a perfectly good example. The Reston Chorale is another really good example of that. But it also touches, through PD's work and others, these incredible nationally, internationally recognized acts that come here and bring an amazing cultural experience to this community. And so how do we want to use this space? Is it for, local artisans, League of Reston Artists? Or is there a different way to serve that important need elsewhere in the community if we use this space in a more regional, expansive way? I think those are the kinds of things we ought to be thinking about as a community. Thank you for listening to all that.
What is the original way? What was the original way that you say, we want to use the space in the original way? So yeah, I think this an art center that have to serve all the art performance, serve the performance for theater, and also for visual art. So visual art for technology, absolutely, I'm totally in. And a large space outside that can be used like for land art, for example. So, but it cannot be used for one thing. So nothing has to be prioritized. So everyone needed the regular share, their own share. So it's an art center. Art is big, has a big meaning in all the different disciplines. So you cannot prioritize the theater or the performance or the technology or the visual art. Art is all of this. So
Yeah, I
and
guess my own point
we
was-
have to share equally. That is the idea.
Right, I think sharing is one thing, but thinking about how we meet all the needs of the community with the multiple facilities we have in the community is another.
Excuse me, but
Let me
this
just finish my
meeting
point.
was for visual arts, and I think you are deviating into you're trying to prioritize again the performing arts.
No, I'm
And
not.
this meeting, yes, you are.
I'm
And-
representing Tefra ICA, which is the visual arts gallery in Reston Town Center.
Which one are you?
Tefra ICA, which was
Okay, so
formerly the Greater
Grace
Reston Arts
Art.
Center.
Okay,
Yeah,
yes.
Grace.
And so my point is, if we were going to stand up something like Tefra ICA at this space, assuming there are scarce resources, there's finite space, we may not be able to, everybody can use that space. If Tefra ICA reached up there, it has unique needs. They're different than if the League of Reston Artists might, for example, stand up. There may be ways to do all of that. I'm raising that issue of, do we have to prioritize and strategize about the vision
Yeah,
of the
well-
space? Thank you.
No, excuse me.
I'm having a little bit of, excuse me, a little bit of difficulty talking. Of visualizing this section J. We've got, 60,000 square feet, but what does that mean? Is that the footprint of section J?
It's not. The footprint is smaller than the 60,000 square feet.
So we're talking about a building that goes up.
Yes.
Is this 60,000 square feet of a 20-story building that would be blended into Boston Properties' huge Reston Gateway? Or would it be something separate? Because in considering how people might be encouraged to come and be comfortable, it would make a big difference whether
Right.
this is a separate facility or is simply part of a gigantic part
Right.
of Reston Town Center.
Now, it's my understanding, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but that the block would be dedicated to this art center to be named, and it would not be incorporated into a high-rise above it. So it would be the destination. It would be occupying the site for its own uses, and all the service and loading and needs for that facility would happen on that block J, with nothing above it or nothing below it that would be a different use by the developer. And I don't see DPWES changing that, so it's my understanding.
So you can all visit the project website, which I urge you to do. The proffer is for Block J, the transfer of Block J to Fairfax County, along with up to 60,000 square feet of developable space. So it is both the block and the development rights. And how the end outcome is achieved is a very, as I mentioned 2 weeks ago, a very long distance between where we are now and where we will need to be at the end of the day. It will involve first understanding what the panoply of needs are, which is what the point of these meetings is, and then getting a sense of how that translates into smaller square footage increments and how they might connect or not, or relate to each other or not, and in turn, what that suggests about a rough order of magnitude of cost. Until we get that information, the county cannot proceed to have the conversations that happen after that about how it gets paid for, how partners participate, how use of the space is prioritized, and how the efficiency of the space supports the greatest amount of outcomes and services and activities, how it's operated, and by whom, and for whom. So all of this is very preliminary, and all of the questions and conversation that's occurred so far, and all of the issues that people have raised, cost, operation, prioritization, privileging of access and use, all of these are issues that have yet to be resolved, and we can't begin to contemplate some of those gnarlier issues until we really have a sense of the totality of art's purposes and needs. So it's, you never want to start actualizing something from the land of what's not possible. You want to start from the land of what's needed and desired. And we're still in the land of dreams right now. And when we finish understanding what those dreams cost, we'll start working on what's possible. Thank you. Does that help?
Yes, thanks.
Yes. You have to listen to the community.
Yes, that definitely helps, and I know we're in La La Land still. But, and I brought this up at the first meeting, which is the operations aspect, is who's gonna operate it, and that has a huge impact in how this facility is run, how much is dedicated to what, whether it's, you know, the owner strictly deciding what's gonna be done and who's gonna be involved in that building, or whether the county is gonna be involved or the local community Reston leaders are gonna be involved deciding how it's operated and who gets what. So yeah.
I want to be very, very clear about this. The proffer exists to benefit the county. There can't be some other private outside entity that negotiates this proffer. So unless and until Fairfax County government decides it can or cannot accept this offer, right now it will be a discussion and a conversation between the current property owner and Fairfax County government. So that suggests to me, given my experience, that at the end of the day, if the county determines it's a proffer worth pursuing, there will be involvement on the part of the government. The county, the schools, RCC potentially, but the government writ large. And the second point I want to make, because it's a critical one, people have mentioned many times that corporations should pay for this. And I just want to point out that corporations already pay in Reston. They pay nearly half of all the revenue that's generated by Small District 5 tax on property owners in Reston. So corporations, landowners, commercial landowners, they pay taxes just like individual homeowners do. And they pay in Reston almost half of what the Reston tax base generates in terms of tax revenue. And that's something that's unique. That's not true of every other part of Fairfax County. And what that means to individual residents and residential property owners is that all of the county amenities, all of the public amenities that you enjoy because 50% of the subsidy that provides them comes from the commercial property tax base. So they do pay a considerable amount to contribute to the quality of life in this community. I don't want to go out of these meetings not acknowledging the tremendous contribution that.
Paying on this property.
Right.
Well,
So.
Then we should try to let them keep paying 50% on this project.
But,
Okay, thank you. Oh, we have one more comment. Yeah.
On a slightly different tack, but also seeking further clarification, is the outreach, the wishes and needs survey that's part of the feasibility study only happening here? And if so, that concerns me because this is a very small number of users, and if this is something that's to be a countywide benefit, then it seems like we need to get input from a wider distribution of potential users and find out what their needs and wishes are. And I think maybe that's being done through the Fairfax Arts Council. I'm not sure whether there have been other meetings in other parts of the county, as you know, along the Silver Line or Great Falls, or areas that have arts groups that might be potential users.
So the Master Arts Plan Task Force, that's a function of both the county and Arts Fairfax, has been getting information about arts needs in the county for more than 10 years. And it's been an ongoing investigative process. And it's generated a draft plan for facilities for the entirety of the county. The map that you see, the interactive map of visual and performing arts venues throughout Fairfax County and the region, the larger region, the metropolitan DC region, is a function of that task force work. And there have been multiple other outreach efforts to both arts organizations and arts venue operators. So all of the information that will go into the investigation of this opportunity will be done in that context.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. And just to be respectful of everyone's time, we've actually come up to 7:55 or 7:56. We did want to just remind everyone that our next focus group is 2 weeks from now. It's going to be on Zoom, and we're really encouraging everyone to pre-register for that, just as a lot of people have done for all of these meetings, because then the Zoom link gets shared with you. And there has been outreach on that account to a lot of to Fairfax County Public Schools and a lot of the different arts education groups and neighborhood groups. And so we're hoping that the reason of having it on Zoom is that it's more accessible for people at this time of night in the middle, on a Monday. So anyway, we won't be in this room. That'll be our first meeting on a Zoom platform. I really hope we can see everybody's faces again. If you want to come to that, again, I imagine we're going to be talking about both performing and visual in that capacity, because we need to make sure that the arts integrate with education and other needs for the community on both platforms there. So, and then 1 week after that, we'll have a general wrap-up, which will also be on Zoom, where we'll be synthesizing some of this input that we've gotten from everyone. So those are the next 3 weeks, a little snapshot there. And again, just a little shameless plug for the email, the rcccontact@fairfaxcounty.gov, and then the website, the fairfaxcounty.gov, Public Works, Capital Projects, Reston Arts Center. That's where the recordings of this these meetings are, where the PDFs and PowerPoints are displayed from these presentations. We put the little poll results there, and if you have any other questions, please use that email. It gets trickled down to everybody. But we just really want to thank everybody. I know it's tough to just continue to come every week and sort of say the same thing, or just if you feel like you're not being heard, we are hearing you, and we really appreciate all this input because it really does help create the priorities, shape the facility, shape the wish list, and we really value all of your input. So thank you very much. That's the end of the meeting. So, thanks.